taking the time to come and chat with us about your experiences. We are very excited to hear from you, what you have learned, and your insights and takeaways. So,
Yeah,
warm welcome from
excellent.
our side.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. So first and foremost, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. And what I'd love to share with you today, because my last 5 years in digital health have been quite a roller coaster, to say the least, is a few eye openers. And when I say eye openers, I basically mean things that I did not anticipate, things that really surprised us, things that I also had to learn the hard way. And maybe some of these learnings or these insights might be helpful for you guys in your future decision making when it comes to digital health. But before we dive right into it, I'll give you a bit of background about myself. I'll also introduce you to the startup that I'm a part of. And then lastly, I hope we have plenty of time for Q&A and discussions. Cool. All right. So my name is Hauke Rienhoff. I'm 35 years old. I was born and raised in Germany. I have a business background, so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, purely business. I did my bachelor in business administration, followed by a master's in management from IE Business School. I did quite a bit of studying abroad, and yeah, roughly almost 10 years ago, I made my way to Switzerland, to Zurich, and worked at Monitor Deloitte. I was part of the life sciences strategy team in strategy consulting, where we basically supported pharma and medtech and also biotech companies in their commercial strategies and their market access strategies. It was a really exciting time. I did roughly 4.5 years and I really enjoyed it, but I was yearning to leave the corporate world at some point and become some sort of entrepreneur myself. And in 2021, I then had the chance and the opportunity to become co-managing director at Orthopy. And yeah, I haven't regretted it since. So it was a good decision and it was yeah, a roller coaster ride, but it was a good one. So who or what is Orthopy? Orthopy is a DiGA startup from Germany. So we're developing digital health applications, and Sabra mentioned that you're all familiar with the concept of DiGA and the acronym DiGA. So it's basically health applications that doctors can prescribe in Germany. In our case, it's orthopedists, and which are reimbursed by health insurance companies. And yeah, which is still fairly a pretty new emerging market in Germany. And what we've done is we've focused very early on acute orthopedic injuries. So what's behind acute orthopedic injuries? We basically have two products. One is for knee injuries and the other one is for shoulder injuries. And it's for ACL and meniscus, the very first DIGA that we developed. ACL is anterior cruciate ligament. You might have heard of it. It is a Kreuzbandriss in Germany. So a very common sports injury that you have when you ski or when you play soccer or any other type of sports. It's very common. And this type of injury is also often a co-injury that also comes with a tear in your meniscus. So both of these indications are very similar, both sports injuries that you have on your knee. And then our second application is for rotator cuff. So it's a shoulder injury that we developed. So for ACL and meniscus, we've been 2 years in the DIGA market in Germany, but unfortunately last year in September, we got delisted. So now we're fighting our way back into the market. We have clinical trials up and running, and hopefully next year we'll be back on the market again, stronger than ever. So you might think how our product works. So we basically have three pillars. The very first one is education. So we try to educate patients about their injuries, about their orthopedic injuries that they have. What we try to do here is we really try to answer the top 50 questions that all patients have when they have an ACL or a meniscus. We use video explanations, we have text explanations, we have a lot of pictures, so everybody understands his injury, but also the treatment path that's lying ahead of them. So the second pillar is the most important pillar, which is trainings and exercises. So we provide trainings through different phases that every patient goes through. So meniscus and ACL injuries are typically healed through surgery. So you have a pre-surgery phase and a post-surgery phase. And for each of these phases, we provide different trainings that patients can do at home. And it's really important here to mention that it is an add-on. So patients typically still get physiotherapy, but for their home training, for their home exercises, they can use our application. And the third pillar of the application is progress tracking. So all the exercises are tracked within the app. The adherence is being tracked. We have outcome measures, so surveys that patients can take every 2 weeks, and then they can see very neatly how they're progressing over time. Because yeah, these types of sports injuries take quite a bit of time to heal. So for an ACL or a meniscus, you need 9 to 12 months until you're back on track. And for the first time, you now have, yeah, not a black data box anymore. You have data that you can also take to your consultations with your doctor or with your physiotherapists. So a few things that we were really proud of. So over the last years, and Orthopy is roughly 6 years old, two of them, or 2 years we've been on the market, and we've already supported more than 20,000 patients in Germany. We've collaborated with more than 300 orthopedic clinics or practices. So quite a lot of doctors have prescribed us in Germany. In those 2 years, we've developed three indications. A fourth indication is already under development. And we've in total worked on 5 clinical trials. Two of them are already conducted, and we're right now doing another 3 clinical trials with roughly 1,000 patients in total. So some facts and figures that we're really proud of. And underneath, you see some of the clinical partners that we've partnered with to conduct our clinical trials. And these are very renowned clinics for orthopedics in Germany. So we're really proud of this. Actually, right now, there is also one of the largest orthopedic congresses in Prague going on, the ESCA, and we've already done 2 publications there also, which is something great that this science is also publicized. Yeah, now that was the part about myself and also about Orthopy. But now I really want to talk to you about some of these eye openers, and I really want to or invite you guys also to ask questions along the way. Whenever you have something, please raise your hand. I'll try to stop. So the very first one is about regulation. It's kind of a bummer, and you might already know in which direction this is going. So, when we started 6 years ago, we were pretty naive and we thought, hey, this is so cool. We're doing something innovative. We're developing a new product. We're going to revolutionize the way patients are being treated. We're going to push boundaries and we're going to push indoors. And this is going to be 80% of our workload. We'll really innovate and work on the product. And then, yeah, of course, there is some part of regulation to gain market access, but also for the product because it's digital health or because it's healthcare in general. But to be brutally honest, the reality is the opposite, right? You're just doing 20% of innovation and the rest is regulation. And that is frustrating. So, luckily, I was naive that I thought back in the day it would be this way. Otherwise, I might have not started. But uh, that's that's just the way it is. And I'll try to give you an example. So for one of our clinical trials, we need a score, an outcome measure basically that we measure throughout the clinical trial. And before we started with the trial, we realized that the score that we wanted to use is licensable. So we had to get a license to use the score. So we reached out to the provider that offers a score. And just for the fun of it, we've mapped all the touch points that we've had with this provider. So it basically took us 6 months just to come to an agreement to use the score for our clinical trials. And that's just, I don't know, a metaphor for all the things in life sciences or in healthcare where things are complicated and lengthy and expensive. Um, so I could probably provide an equal timeline to all our discussions that we've had with the ethics committees. So when you want to do a clinical trial, you need to get approval from ethics committees or sometimes also the BfArM. And that also takes a lot of time and that's very complicated and lengthy. And this is just running in parallel, right? I mean, this is not even the product itself. This is just the prep you need to do to sort with clinical trials, for instance. I see there is something written in the chat, but I cannot look at it right now. Is it a
Wait,
question, maybe?
there is a
Yeah, that,
question. Oh, you want to
yeah,
ask it, Connor?
yeah. If that's a good moment, I didn't want to interrupt.
No,
Uh,
sure.
how could, with the learnings you did over the years, sometimes looking back, you get smarter, no?
Yeah.
So, with everything you learned, could you address the regulatory legal burden in a different way, strategy and save energy? So make out of the 80-20, 60-40?
That is really good question. That is really good question. Now in hindsight, I'm not sure whether we would have been able to do things differently. Like, I mean, something like this you just cannot anticipate, right? I mean, you know there is a licensable score, you reach out, you think, hey, this might take 2 weeks, and then suddenly it drags on for 6 months. That's something that just comes out of nowhere. So maybe with the interactions with the BfArM and the ethics committee, now we get smarter, right? And we think, all right, we already have to plan this into our business planning, into our product development roadmap, that this might take 6 months of back and forth to just get your study protocol approved. Now we have some experience in this, but it's also so dependent on who you work with. Like, we are conducting clinical trials in southern Germany, and therefore you have an ethics committee that's responsible in southern Germany, in Baden-Württemberg, for instance. And they might be very, very slow, but when you conduct clinical trials in northern Germany and suddenly it's a completely different ethics committee, it can take a week or a month. It really depends. Like, there is so little that you can really anticipate in that. So, yeah.
In that context, like as a small startup, you never can be experienced expert in everything, no?
Yeah.
Did you work with external consultants in some of those aspects, and could that be an accelerator
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
cash drain?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, that's a good comment. Absolutely. You can work with external companies. We've done that. We had market access advisors, and I would highly recommend that for anybody who starts. So we've worked, for instance, with FBeta. That's a very renowned company in Germany that helps DiGA startups. I think they're working with roughly 60-70% of all the startups in Germany, and they helped us a lot. Now we've really developed some internal capabilities in this. So our clinical team and our market access team is really great and really experienced. But for the first 1 to 3 years, I would really advise to work with these companies because they have these experience and they can tell you, hey, if you go to the ethics committee, do it early on because it's going to drag on, it's going to take time. So very important. Yeah.
Maybe jumping on that, can you maybe walk us through your roadmap in terms of time? So how long it took you, like from concept to actually become a DIGA?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you also went through like fast procedures from DIGA, or how did it go for you?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think our first DIGA from idea to DIGA certificate took 3.5 years. Yeah. So 3.5 years. Maybe these days product development can be faster with all the available tools that you have, but what's really taking time is clinical trials. And maybe if that's also of interest, I can quickly give a timeline for clinical trials. So we're right now conducting 3 clinical trials in parallel, and that is at least 1.5 years each, right? So you have 5 months of recruiting. The last patient that you recruit needs to go through the whole clinical trial, which in our case is 3 months. So you're already at 8 months until last patient is out. After last patient is out, you can pull the data. That takes statistical analysis 2 weeks to up to 1 month. Then you need to write the report. That might also take 1 or 2 months. Then you hand in the report. That is another 3 to 6 months on the BfArM side. And suddenly you're up 12 to 16 months in total. And there is no shortcuts for this.
Sorry, we learned during the discourse about the micro randomized trials. Is this something that you also did, and are those also considered for DIGA or?
No, we did a clinical trial with 80 patients to get preliminary approval. So that was already quite a small sample size. But the next main trial that we did was 400 patients. And I think when I look at all the other DIGAs, they typically have population sizes of at least 200 to 300 patients to get a permanent listing straight away. I haven't heard of any other micro sizes or micro trials that you can do.
Yeah, I think I would just jump in to clarify that the micro randomized trial is something that you do when you are developing your intervention to
Mhm.
see which components are making the biggest impact. But this would be before you would get to a clinical trial stage. So
Okay.
once you
Yeah.
have your intervention finalized, and Toby, please jump in if I if I make if I misspeak at all. But once you have your intervention finalized, then you have to prove that it has a positive outcome on patients. And so then you would still need to go through the randomized control trial if you want to be listed as a DIGA, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an A/B testing in a very
Um,
systematic way with technology. Yeah.
okay. Great. All right. Yeah. So product and innovation is really just the tip of the iceberg, and what's sort of underneath is all of these aspects. And I think the sort of key takeaway here is that you think in the beginning success really depends on this product and innovation part, but the truth is that the regulatory matters more. Right. So my second eye opener was around clinical workflows. So let's say you have your product up and ready. You go to doctors and you introduce it to HCPs, and the HCP is really interested, and you think it's great, and you're all happy and excited because the HCP really likes the idea, and he says, "Well, I'm going to use it for my patients. It's great." And you think, "Wow, this is a win for the patient. It's a win for the HCP, and also a win for you as a DIGA manufacturer, of course, because you've just won a client." And you leave the practice, you tell all your colleagues about it, you're all excited, and then suddenly nothing happens. So there's weeks and weeks and nobody prescribes your product or nobody uses your product. And you're like, why is that? And that is often because you underestimate or you don't really understand the reality that your customers are in. So this is the typical schedule of an orthopedist, right? And the orthopedists are our target group for our products. So they have 5 days, and on 3 days they have consultation hours, and the other 2 days are blocked for surgeries. So they're just standing in the operating room all day, conducting surgeries. So what you need to keep in mind on those 3 consultation hour days, they see 60 to 80 patients per day in their consultation hours, which means they have 5 to 8 minutes per patient, which is incredibly little time. They are working with 2 to 3 medical assistants that are running around from room to room to room and switching rooms at the same time. So in these 5 to 8 minutes, the doctors have to make some sort of diagnose. They have to do an assessment. They're talking to the patient. They're doing the consultation. They make decisions, maybe jointly with the patient. And then they also still require some time to do the admin and follow-up, right? So in 5 to 8 minutes, they're conducting all these activities, which is incredible. And it's like a clockwork. Process is like a clockwork. They have really tight workflows. And if your product just takes more than 30 seconds to explain, that's already a showstopper. That's already it. Like it's not going to work in their process. So you really have to make sure that whatever you suggest to the doctor, all the activities that the doctor has to do, like prescribing, explaining the product, etc., needs to be reduced to an absolute minimum because otherwise the burden or the barrier to use your product is going to be too high. And from our experience, you need at least 20 to 25 touch points with the doctor and with the staff of the doctor to really make it a habit to use your product. So it's not enough to just go there once and explain it and they say, well, I'm interested, great, I'll use it. No, you need to follow up. You need to teach all the medical assistants. There are also people in the back office, right? The people sitting at the reception that need to be informed about it. So you have to remind them again and again and again. And only then, after like 25 to 30 touch points or 3 months, it becomes a habit and they really use your product in their workflows. So my key takeaway here is somehow, generating interest is very easy, but changing clinical workflows is extremely hard. Corna.
Another question, Hauke.
Yeah.
Is your product having a provider clinician interface? And if yes, it doesn't. Okay.
No, it doesn't. And we specifically decided not to.
Because
Because then the doctor has extra effort. So the doctor has to log in, the doctor has to look at the data, the doctor has to do extra tasks, and we don't want to overburden the doctor with additional stuff that he needs to do. Because in the end, this is extra time that nobody is paying.
yeah,
The health insurance isn't paying the extra 10 minutes that the doctor is logging into some system, looking at data, exchanging with patients, etc. And they're not going to do it in their free time, like at 10 p.m. at night when they're home. So we specifically said, no, patients can bring their data to the consultation when they want to present the data to the doctor, but we're not going to have some sort of interface. We specifically decided against it. But also because of this, because we understand the reality that the doctors are in. Was there more questions? No. Okay, cool. Right. The third eye opener is sort of the power of niches. So one of the key questions that you need to ask yourself at some point, or there is a question from Costas.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah,
Coming back to the healthcare providers, how open they were for your solution? I mean, you said they're so busy, and I understand you wouldn't change something that is working. So how open they were to adopt your digital health
yeah.
product?
I think they were
I mean,
super open. I
okay.
love orthopedists in that sense. I feel like it's a great group of doctors. They were very open for innovation. They were very open for apps. And when we have a doctor that is really specialized in knees, and we have half an hour to talk to them, I would say 80% of the doctors are interested in our product afterwards. So the success rate is really high. But what still makes it difficult is getting this into the processes and into the workflows.
And just talking to doctors is enough. I mean, are they the people who make to take the decision, or you need to talk to some other management?
No, it's really the orthopedist. It's
Okay.
really the orthopedist. I mean, in a clinic, it might be different than in a practice because in the clinic you still have the chief doctors that also are deciding commercial. There are some commercial aspects also to it, and you need the approval sometimes from the chief clinician to really roll it out. But in the practices, it's just the orthopedists that are taking the decision.
Thank you.
Sure. So the power of niches. So one of the major questions that you're gonna ask yourself is, all right, who am I gonna target? What sort of indication am I gonna look at? And it was pretty clear that we're gonna go into orthopedics, but also in orthopedics, there are hundreds of applications or indications that you could look at, right? And we sort of stumbled by accident to ACL and meniscus because one of our founders, Lenny, he had two ACLs himself, and he had a terrible experience and said, well, this patient journey needs to be improved. Uh, and that's why we focused on ACL. But now in hindsight, we're very happy that we did. And I'll try to explain why. But sort of intuitively, you might look at different indications and see that the market sizes for these indications are quite different, right? So you have ACL and meniscus, they're roughly 230,000 cases in Germany per year. So it's 60 to 70,000 ACLs per year, and then there is 2 to 3 times the amount of menisci. So in total, 230,000 cases. On the other side, there are indications like chronic back pain, where you have millions of patients, like really large markets, large indications, or large cases per year. And you sort of intuitively want to say, well, why don't we do something for chronic back pain? And that's what many of our competitors are doing. So there are quite some companies that have developed also physiotherapy applications for chronic back pain. There is Kaya, there is Vivira, there is Vamendo. So quite a bit. But market size is not the only thing that matters when you make these decisions. And I'll try to explain why. So what we love about ACL and meniscus is that physicians are very specialized in this area. So our target are just orthopedists. And among the orthopedists, even a subset of orthopedists. So it's knee surgeons. Because orthopedists typically specialize in one extremity. So there's orthopedists who just look at shoulders, there's one that are just doing hips, there are some that are just focusing on knee or on ankle. So we're just looking at the knee surgeon or the knee orthopedists. And these guys also have a very high patient concentration. So they are they see our indications at least 10 times per day. So every fourth patient or sometimes even every third patient is an ACL or a meniscus patient. So they're confronted with the indication every day, again and again. This is very different in chronic back pain, for instance, right? Because people that suffer from chronic back pain don't just go to orthopedists, they also go to the general practitioner. And there, the general practitioner sees patients from A to Z, right? He sees patients that have a flu, they see patients with chronic back pain, it can be anything, right? So sometimes they just have a patient with your indication maybe once per week, and that is too little. That is too little patient pooling per doctor from our perspective. There is also less standardized workflows in these general practitioners or orthopedists who are doing everything. So for us, it's a lot easier to target knee surgeons, which is a very specific specific niche, and that makes it a lot easier to address. And you need less resources also to talk to all these doctors because you're basically just looking at, let's say, um, 500 KOLs in Germany, 500 key opinion leaders that are specialized in knee versus thousands of general practitioners that you might have to contact for chronic back pain. And what's also really great about ACL and meniscus in that sense is the patient urgency and the patient motivation because the pain level is really high. Patients are very anxious because they know they're going to have surgery at some point. And a lot of them are athletes. It's a sports injury. So they want to get back on track. They want to perform sports again. They want to go and exercise again. So they're really motivated to do something about it. With chronic back pain patients, it's different. They're older and sometimes their back hurts, but other times it doesn't. And it's very frustrating, but it's also difficult to adhere to a program. So I just want to highlight some of the differences in different indications. I don't want to say chronic back pain is a crappy indication, not at all. It can be very interesting, and I mean there is reasons why so many competitors are looking at it, but I think these decisions need to be sensible.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting statement, actually. That's counterintuitive. Do you think that this is the experience also of other startups, maybe that you came across, or this was very specific for you?
No, I think this is something that many startups have experienced, that they targeted indications or that they focused on indications which on paper sound interesting, but in reality weren't. And especially when you're a startup and you have very little resources and you don't have a big sales force, for instance, you gotta be very, very sensible at how you use your resources. And betting on the wrong horse in that sense, betting on the wrong indication can be tragic.
Thank you.
All right. So my fourth sort of key learning is partnerships. So you might have noticed that in our logo we say Orthopy powered by Enovis. So where does this powered by come from and who's Enovis? So Enovis is a US-based medtech company. Most people don't know Enovis, but it's actually really a sizable medtech corporate. They do more than 2 billion in sales. They have more than 7,000 employees across the globe, and they're very focused on orthopedics. And they're also renowned for externalizing innovation. So they scout the market for innovative companies or innovative products and see whether this is fitting to their own product portfolio. And then they partner or collaborate or sometimes even acquire through M&A. And we were very lucky that these guys reached out to us 3 years ago and proposed a partnership with us. And at that stage, we still thought, hey, maybe we can even do it on our own and we don't even need partners. But now in hindsight, we are very, very happy that we went into this partnership with them because it's sort of combining the best of both worlds, right? We bring speed and agility, but Enovis brings resources and the scale. So they invested in us, gave us a bunch of resources that we again could use to develop new products. We bring the product innovation, but they bring the commercial infrastructure. So they in Germany have more than 35 sales reps that are visiting orthopedists on a daily basis. So we really fit nicely into their product portfolio. So it's a win-win for both. And we don't have 35 people on our payroll. So our responsibility split is that we're developing the products, that we're conducting the clinical trials, and whether we do all the regulation behind it, but they're doing our sales and marketing activities. And they have built up quite a bit of trust among the doctors in Germany. They have the commercial infrastructure. They're really good at events and congresses and have the distribution power. And this works very nicely and in conjunction. And what you see when you observe the market, that quite a bit of pharma and medtech companies are now collaborating with smaller DIGA startups. So these are just a few examples of really big pharma and medtech companies that have teamed up with DIGA producers or DIGA manufacturers in Germany. And some of these partnerships work well, others might not work as successfully. But we on our side can say we're really happy about it. Sabra.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like the dream of many startups, right? That you get a large pharma company or medtech company, and there's a successful partnership, and you can leverage their resources and really importantly, their sales force on the ground, right? That HCP trust that you mentioned. But in practice, I've seen that this is extremely difficult. So, what tips would you have maybe for a startup who is looking to get another collaboration like that and isn't perhaps as lucky as you were to be approached by a company?
Yeah. No, I totally see that. So number one for me is probably portfolio fit. So how does your product really fit into your partner's portfolio? Like for us, it worked out very nicely because they have products that are specifically for the same target group as we have, right? So this here on the left side is a brace. This is for ACL patients. So one of their largest customer group is knee surgeons, orthopedists that are specialized in knee surgery. So they talk to all the doctors that perform ACL surgeries, which is exactly our target group. So now they can go and say, hey, we not only have all the surgical instruments that you're going to use for your surgery, we also have all the rehabilitation products, such as casts and orthesis. Now we also have a rehabilitation app that your patients can also use. So it's a very nice addition to their product portfolio. So it works well. Another point would probably be incentives. So incentives need to be aligned because some of these companies, they have huge portfolios, right? They have a lot of products in their basket, and you need to make sure that your product is not number 999 in their product portfolio, but that it stands out and that they also put focus on this product because otherwise it's just going to be one among too many. So incentivization of the sales force to really push your product is important. So sales reps obviously have variable components, bonus structures. So you need to make sure that your product also becomes part of this bonus structure, because otherwise they're not going to push your product. They're going to focus on other products.
Yeah, super important. Thank you for diving a little deeper into that.
Yeah, sure. All right, and this is already my last eye opener, and that is about legal ambiguity. And what I mean by that is when you sort of look at the time um, that DIGA and also other equivalents in other markets have spent is very, very little. So DIGA was introduced. What I mean is DIGA was introduced in 2020. Pecan, the French version of DIGA, came in 2024. And now Switzerland has also come up with a digital health concept. And I think the first one was getting reimbursement this year. So what all of these have in common, these are markets that have developed under 5 years, so they're incredibly young. They're still developing markets in comparison to pharma, medtech, that's been around for decades. So in developing markets, you have very little legal precedence, and that has consequences, and I'll try to explain. So when you have very little legal precedent, the interpretation of the law becomes power. So it's very, very important who has ownership of the interpretation of the law. And sometimes this interpretation creates ambiguity. And when you have ambiguity, that amplifies power asymmetries. What I mean by that is power asymmetries, for instance, between you as a startup and a large institution like the BfArM or the organization of health insurance companies in a market. You're very, very small and tiny, and they're a huge institution with tons of resources. Or it's you as a startup against very large competitors, pharma or medtech companies that also have incredible resources. So they have an advantage. And when you have these power asymmetries, they naturally discourage resistance. So when you're up against somebody really, really big, you're not really tempted to pick a fight with them, right? And when you don't resist, you also don't create no new precedent, and that's sort of a vicious cycle because with no new precedent, you're stuck with little legal precedent in the market, right? So the only way to sort of interrupt this is by legal escalation. So sometimes you as a startup in a new developing market need to find the courage to escalate legally to get to this new precedent. And that is something that I would have not anticipated before. Because I mentioned before, we got delisted last year. We are fighting this right now. So we objected to this. And that takes courage and it takes resources. And it is not an equal power game in that sense because you're up against large institutions or large competitors. But you have to be brave. Otherwise, you're going to be pushed around. So, yeah, my sort of key takeaway is, in emerging markets, you sometimes need to go through conflict to get legal clarity. And you need to be brave to get that. All right. And that's the end of it. And now I hope we still have a bit of time for Q&A or a discussion. Ollie.
Yeah, thank you, Hauke. That's a great presentation and interesting, these eye openers as well, especially the last one. So you've been around for 4+ years and you've obviously reached the certification. You have a big partner behind yourself. I assume that also most of the financing has come through that partner. What is your objective then over the next, 3 years? Where do you want to get to? What is your target then?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Well, I think it is product development. So we really want to push the product, but also go into different indications. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there are so many indications in orthopedics alone that you could look at. Like there are shoulder indications, ankle indications, hip indications. There are so many interesting things where a digital tool could really help. Just imagine endo. Um, I am not familiar what the English word for it is. Where you get a knee replacement or hip replacement, for instance, right? These are very large indications, and there are very, very many cases in these area these days, and all of these could help a digital helper, let's say. So I think we really want to go into more products, but also markets could be interesting, right? I mean, Germany has a reimbursement pathway right now. France is following. Switzerland is following. Of course, the question has to be asked, like, wouldn't it also be great to go into the US at some point? I mean, that would be incredible. And maybe in the US, you don't even need a reimbursable product through the health insurance companies. Maybe there's even people that are willing to pay out of pocket. But yeah, in the beginning, you just have to focus on one product or one market. Otherwise, you'll do too much.
Okay, thank you.
Gaia.
Hi, Hauke.
Hey.
Super interesting presentation. Thank you. I have a question. Which data can the patient show to the orthopedist?
So what he can show to the doctor when he goes to the
Mm-hmm.
consultation hours again?
Yes.
So typically what the orthopedist says is, all right, you've just had surgery. Now do the following. Go to your physiotherapist. You need to do these type of exercises. You can only put this much weight on your leg, and you can only bend or extend your knee in a certain manner. And then this translates into training regimens that the patient typically does with the physiotherapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after 6 weeks, after 12 weeks, the patient goes back to the doctor, and the doctor always asks, of course, how is your knee? How are you doing your exercises? How much are you training? Because that's very, very important for the rehabilitation. And then the patient can basically say anything. I mean, he can say, well, I did some physiotherapy. Yes, of course, I'm doing my exercises, but there is no way to track. There is no way to know whether he actually has done his exercises, whether he has actually done all the trainings that he's supposed to do. Now, the app tracks this all. So some doctors that are using or that prescribe our product, they tell the patient, hey, when you come back in 6 weeks, I want to see how you practiced.
Mm-hmm.
That puts, of course, a bit of pressure on the patient, but the patient takes it very seriously. And the next time he comes back, he shows the doctor on his application, hey, these are all the trainings that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
This is the amount of time I've spent. So this is all being tracked. But there are also surveys within the application. So the patient gets prompted to conduct surveys quite frequently where he gets asked about his symptoms and about pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does this regularly, you can see how he progresses over time. And this kind of data is also very interesting for the doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. And then a last question, are you thinking about to use or to introduce sensors to improve the quality of movement, or it's too complex, or yeah?
Yeah, we've also thought about that a lot, and some competitors are doing that. They have motion tracking, and from a technical standpoint, that's already technology that's available on any smartphone. Like iPhone has this, and there is a whole developer suite around it. It gets tricky though, because when you do motion tracking, for instance, you always have to make sure that you have the right distance between you and your phone. So your whole body, for instance, is captured by the camera. That makes it tricky because sometimes you have to step away, let's say 3 meters from the camera to do the exercises, but then you cannot see what you need to do on the smartphone as good because it's too far away.
Yeah.
That is one thing that's a bit tricky, but that doesn't have to be a showstopper. But we initially decided against it because a lot of doctors have told us, you know, it's not as important how the patient is conducting the exercises. I mean, of course, he shouldn't be he shouldn't do the exercise completely wrong, but it doesn't really matter by the degree. You know, it's much more important that the patient is doing something. It is not as bad if the patient does the exercise a little bit too far to the left or a little bit too far to the right. That's okay as long as he does the exercise. It doesn't have to be super, um, yeah, super correct in that sense. So we decided against it. But for our new product, we're putting it up to debate again.
Okay.
So we want to use motion tracking maybe for tests that the patient can do at home. So
Cool.
like let's say after 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, he conducts a certain test, and then we can tell him how he is progressing.
Cool. Yeah, cool idea. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure. Shama.
I have a question, but I mean, feel free if it's confidential information. Like, what type of partnership do you have with Enovis? And at which stage of the development of your app did you did you come across this partnership? And are you profitable or not yet? And how long do you think that a Diga app in general takes before becoming profitable?
Yeah, these are really good questions. So we have a strategic partnership with Enovis, which basically means they've given us money, they've invested in us in the beginning, but they're also our very strong partners, and they've indicated that they would also be interested to integrate us fully at some point when we reach certain milestones. So that's just the way Enovis operates. Whenever they see something interesting in the market, they're open for M&A transactions to integrate this sort of innovation into their organization. So, as I mentioned, now the second question, your profitability, as I mentioned earlier, it took us roughly 3 years to get the Diga listing. So these 3 years we had to finance because we didn't have any revenues, right? We didn't have any reimbursement. So 3 years we had to finance before. And we did this through angel investments, but also through Enovis. And I think we were very cautious on employees, how many employees we have. So we came quite far with very few employees. So we didn't burn as much money as maybe other Diga startups did. But once we were on the market, we were profitable quite fast. Yeah. But that was also through the help of Enovis, right? Because they just had a big sales force and were able to penetrate the market, yeah, extensively.
Can I go next? Okay. Do you have any learnings from on getting funding? And what about salaries? Where I was wondering, did you have salaries that are on the on market average, below the market average, above?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the first question again?
Yeah. If you have learnings on getting funding. I mean, before your partnership, I guess you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, funding is a good question. I think back in the day, we really talked to VCs mostly.
Yeah.
We talked to all sorts of healthcare VCs, and I mean, there is tons of information out there and lists of all the healthcare VCs, etc. And we just reached out to them and we went to events. And we were lucky that we had some people in our network that made introductions for us. So we were really focused on getting VC money. And then suddenly Innovis came around and we said, all right, this makes much more sense for us to go into this strategic partnership than taking money from VC. So we left the VC path and continued with Innovis. But in that sense, we were sort of lucky.
Okay.
But that was also 3.5, 4 years ago now that we had the first introduction to Innovis, or that Innovis reached out to us. Also, the market was completely different there. So I think it was still a bit easier to get VC money than it is today.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the second question was around?
Yes, about the salary definition, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think market average in medtech would be higher than our own salaries right now. I mean, some of the key employees have equity options. So that is sort of the incentive. So it's not necessarily the fixed salary, but the equity options. And I think our salaries are okay, but it's also something different that we offer. So we are a remote first company. We're very flexible when it comes to at what time you want to work, where you want to work. So I think that is something that a lot of employees value that work for Orthopy. Complete flexibility that sometimes corporates cannot offer to that extent. So we've never really had issues finding talent, although we're maybe paying slightly less than industry average.
Thank you for sharing, Hauke. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think this is a very common strategy among startups, to attract talent and get people to have skin in the game, right? To offer some kind of shares in the company or some other kinds of benefits like that. Yeah. So, wow, great. Thank you so much for this talk, Hauke. I learned a lot personally. I hope everyone else found it useful. If we have no further questions, I would, or are there any further questions? Anyone waiting? Yeah.
I didn't want to, first to our cast participants, but thank you also from my side. I think that was wonderful. I just wanted to comment and then maybe one question. So the comment is, we are working now very much in close collaboration with regulatory experts for digital therapeutics, and I can completely confirm and approve everything you mentioned before. It is also a little bit of a mess. Even the cantonal ethics commissions, depending on who you ask, they are not 100% sure what the right way is to do a specific study. And, you have to have a CE mark now or no, right? These kind of things. So, yeah, big thumbs up and congrats and all the best with your next steps. And the question is also related to a piece of research that Sabra is also working on, kind of a DTX component marketplace, when it comes to mindfulness exercises, or when it comes to slow-paced breathing trainings, or when it comes to video recordings of specific exercises. Would you support the idea of it would be good in terms of, not to spend too much resources to redo um, components over and over again versus how cool would it be maybe, right, to tap into existing evidence-based validated components that you could maybe integrate. Obviously, there is the attention that it maybe is not 100%, in the look and feel you want to have it, etc. And then finally you do it your own. But do you have some reflections on that?
So is that sort of a make or buy decision, whether you should do it yourself or whether you should, look for
Yeah,
something already
yeah,
existing and maybe tap on that?
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. That is a very good question. I mean, development or app development has changed so much the last year just because of all the AI tools, etc., that you have, that I think developing something is just a matter of months and not years anymore. So I would say, hey, I don't know, I'd be tempted to do it myself. On the other side, hey, if there is already an existing framework that you can leverage, which maybe already has all the certificates, that already has a label, why bother? Just
Mhm.
just take it. Just take what's already existing and build on it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, okay. The thing is, we at the center, we have so many research projects that obviously there's so many intervention components that we simply reuse because we just can. We have developed it already. So, and we were just discussing, is there maybe more behind it or beyond the research projects to make really value out of that? Yeah, but
No, I'd probably argue for using already what's existing. And yeah, and sometimes also I think also ourselves, we put too much effort in making it look beautiful. But sometimes for patients, the reality is there is nothing really existing. So they're
yeah.
already so thankful for
Mm,
tiny things, even if it doesn't look perfect, even
mm,
if the
mm,
pictures are not ideal, even if, the user interface might be improvable or whatever. You need to see what is a benchmark.
mm,
And
mm,
if the benchmark is I don't have anything at all, I can only Google stuff.
mm,
I'm not going to reach my doctor because he's busy. I don't have anybody else to talk to about this. Then, yeah, also a very um, primal app can already make a big difference.
yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, again.
Cool. All right. Well, it was a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was great, great questions also. Thank you.
It's a round of applause to you, Hauke. Thank you so much for stopping by our course. And yes, we look forward to seeing what Orthopy does next and your great next steps. And best of luck with your struggle against, the regulators in Germany.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye, thanks.
Okay, that was a very interesting discussion. Yeah, especially I was really struck by that, going into it and thinking that you were just going to be innovating and building, and that the regulatory aspect was going to be a teeny tiny part of your work. Few of you were present yesterday at the Fair of Technologies and heard a talk by our collaborator Dietmar, where he really intoned, that planning for regulatory approval needs to be something embedded in from the beginning and not to underestimate it. So it's good to see that that is reinforced in learnings, or maybe not so good to see, maybe not great news, but
I can
yeah.
maybe also conclude because I had another interaction today, an interesting one with Pathway Technologies, the CEO, Dirk Volland. I mean, formerly I was co-founder, or I'm still. I think you cannot get rid of being co-founder, although I'm not really involved anymore. I don't have any shares, but And we had this interesting discussion as a researcher, right? You are probably a little bit more cutting edge always and try to answer research questions that have never been asked before. So this is your starting point. And then if it works out and it's really good, then maybe it becomes a product. And he has always, although he was a PhD student with us a couple of years ago, obviously the other way around, you want to make a product, you want to have impact. So which evidence do you need to bring it to the market? Completely different approaches. And I think today I had this Heureka moment so that, I also understand this a little bit better. It's kind of interesting. Maybe think about it. So in research, you usually do more than studies, right? And the other way around is, again, depends on what kind of evidence is really required. And then obviously usability, you need the documentation for your thing. And obviously at some point, the RCT to show the effectiveness of it, yes. And there we meet. Yeah. Okay, that's just because I was very motivated by the presentation. I liked it very much. Yeah, but Oli, yeah.
What you were referring to before in the question to Hauke, was that related to PathMate and technologies that underlie Manoa, or was that this mobile coach or anything specific?
You meant the marketplace idea?
Well,
Or
yeah,
what?
generally the reuse of components, basically, yeah.
Well, it's very obvious to us at the center, because almost in every, currently in almost every of the intervention, our research partners, which are usually physicians, etc., they love the slow-paced breathing training to reduce acute stress. So we see this in children with obesity, we see this in children with asthma, we see this in cancer patients to better manage. And so at some point I thought, maybe there is this idea of a platform of where you can just build it once. And we have so many studies of Breeze, the sailboat thing, so many studies, well evaluated in several countries, etc. But we always do research with it. We never thought about just making a product so that others can reuse it, right? And I think that was just a question after a couple of years that came up to maybe think about this kind of marketplace. And Sabra is now working on at least on a conceptual paper for that, and so maybe that's a thing. And yeah, your feedback is welcome on that.
No, I just had to think too. I'm in the Tenety Digital Health Accelerator, and there's also one company they're doing AI-generated music for reducing stress. And then it's also the question, where do you use it? Because all the different cases you just mentioned, but there's also corporate wellness programs.
Yeah.
Everywhere you could introduce that in general for around stress reduction. It's very similar to the slow-paced breathing. And then the question on what's the shape of your company? How do you end up? Where are you going to distribute it? What does it become? So yeah, there's so many ways and similarities there. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. So then Juliana Breu?
This knows Anna is Maika is the company. Yeah.
Okay, because she's with the investor company and also providing feedback at some point. Yeah. Okay, but she's then not yet in interactions
Maybe not
with
there
you.
yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Funny. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but maybe to discuss that further, the issue that we now see is obviously in the moment we want to offer that as a serious plugin for others. Then you have the maintenance, and you have to be even, you have the quality management system, etc. And here we just can't because we are at the university, and that's not our task. So, and this is what's being discussed in the paper then by Sabra at some point. Yeah. So
cool. Looking forward to that.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, I want to make sure that you have some time to work on your group project. So I'm going to just quickly stop the recording, and then we can break out into our group rooms.